morning. Good morning and good morning and welcome to the 7th annual Kevin Song Conference on Suicide. Today's program is dedicated to those who have suffered a loss from suicide or who have survived a suicide attempt. We are here to honor your stories and support your journey of hope and healing. In addition to those present in this ballroom at the St. John's Resort in Plymouth, Michigan, welcome to the many folks watching us on Facebook Live. We also want to thank the many partner organizations that have graciously co-hosted this live broadcast, especially Detroit Public Television for producing this event. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote presenters for this Saturday Survivors program, Kevin Berthia and Kevin Briggs, whose presentation today has been made possible in part through generous donations made in memory of Ryan Fitzgerald. In March of 2005, Kevin Berthia was going through a tough time. He couldn't see any way out, so he fell into a deep depression and decided to end his own life at the Golden Gate Bridge. That's where he met retired California Highway Patrol officer Kevin Briggs, who intervened and talked him down. The message and stories of these champions of suicide prevention and survival promises to be a source of hope and healing to all of us watching today. Kevin O'Shea, please come to the stage. Oh, I'm sorry. Kevin Berthia and Kevin Briggs, welcome to the stage.
Morning, how's everybody doing? Everybody hear my voice? Good? All right. Morning, how's everybody doing? I am Kevin Berthia on behalf of Kevin Berthia. Millions are grateful. I heard about it nationally known. I get the opportunity to travel around and just tell my story. So I get the opportunity to tell my story to a lot of different audiences, and we always get the opportunity. When we speak together, it's always a phenomenal thing because I always feel like there's not a room that we can't touch when you get the opportunity to hear both of us talk and we hear both sides of our story. We've been doing this for 10 years now. It's our 10th year, going on our 10th year anniversary as far as being public speakers, as far as just spreading the message of hope. We're just tremendously grateful this morning to be here early to kick off this wonderful event. The last 2 days have been phenomenal, been able to meet so many great people, and we're just excited for this.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Like Kev said, we are very excited to be here with you and for you. We are a community. We really are. Whether that's suicide loss survivors, attempters, those in the mental health profession, first responders, we are a community. And we're going to strengthen that today. I know, as someone who suffers from mental illness, that I can call a number of people here anytime, day or night, and they are there for me. And that's what this is about, being there for one another. Now, we are going to talk about how this day went with Kevin Berthia and how everything went, and then after that. But I don't think we would do it justice if we went back all the way back to when we were very, very small. We want to do this right and give you the full story. So we have a lot of similarities. We've gotten to be very, very close. We get to travel and speak together, and we've learned a lot about each other. But just so you know, I'm on the right. Okay? We got to get that straight. But I suffer from mental illness. lost my grandfather to suicide. He died before I was born. Never got a chance to meet him. Growing up, middle class, California, Marin County, had a great childhood growing up. Went into the Army right out of high school. And I want you to think how mental illness develops as I go along with this. So when I'm in the Army, airborne infantry, went over to Germany, and in 1983, just 20 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer at 20 years old, testicular cancer, something I was also very ashamed of. What did I do to cause this? I didn't talk about it for a long time. I had 3 operations, one being a lymphadenectomy, to where they split you from here down. They take out lymph nodes. And they took out over 40, and over 30 were cancerous. So I had to undergo the chemotherapy. Lost a lot of weight, lose all your hair, go undergo all this for several months. Got past this, started growing my hair back, wanted to get a job. Worked with my father for a bit in San Francisco. He had a printing business, but printing was not for me. I didn't go from the airborne infantry into being a printer. It just wasn't for me. So I applied with the state of California, and I got in with corrections. Worked for 3 years, 2 years at San Quentin State Prison, 1 year at Soledad, and then I got into the California Highway Patrol. But when I was working at San Quentin, my mother developed cancer, and this is a long road through this. She was a smoker and was diagnosed with lung cancer. Went through some chemotherapy, did not go well, stopped it, was bedridden for a very, very long time till she passed away. We see her in front of us, her chest rise and fall, her very last breath. I close her eyes. A lot of trauma. It's very, very difficult to talk about, but I have a lot of support. She was only 49 years old when she passed. Just 49 years old. So as we progressed through this, I rode a motorcycle with the California Highway Patrol. And one of the crashes I was involved in, very, very serious one, out on a rural road, 1 lane each direction, 45 miles an hour, way out going towards the beach. I had about 4 or 5 cars ahead of me, 4 or 5 behind me, and we're all just having a nice day. It's a Sunday coming up on the afternoon. And I'm coming back to the office when another motorcyclist coming towards us, going way too fast, crossed double yellows, just missed the car ahead of me and hit me head on. Our closing speed was determined to be about 105 miles an hour. I remember barely seeing him, about this big, way out there, and we just hit head on, and that's about all I remember about all of that. We talk about traumatic brain injuries, including concussions. So I was out of commission for a long time on that one. Got the helicopter ride. I do remember a few things about it. One is, in my uniform, we have to wear these big black boots. They come all the way up here. They cost a lot of money. I do remember when the paramedics were cutting off all my clothes, I did tell them, don't cut the boots. I remember that, and I don't remember a whole lot about this. But, so they said, all right, no problem. They didn't cut the boots. They cut everything else off. So here I am in this field. All these people are looking at me in my underwear and these boots. And that's it. It was terrible. It was terrible. Got through that. Promoted to the rank of sergeant in 2008. And I went down to where I started with the Highway Patrol in the East Bay near Oakland, California. It's a town called Hayward. A lot of nice people, but a lot of gangs and a lot of violence there too. When I was working there, I started getting these symptoms. One was acid reflux. I thought it was acid reflux that would not go away. And pain in my left shoulder all the way down into my thumb, but just a little piece of it all the way down, not the whole shoulder and arm. I went 3 days before I went to the doctors, got talked into going to the doctors about this, and they knew exactly what was going on. They put me right into a bed, did an EKG. EKG was fine, but the blood work, thank God, that they took came back bad. Your heart puts out an enzyme when it's not functioning properly, and my enzyme level was very, very high. So I was having issues with my heart. Now, many, many times when you talk to trauma victims, so much has gone on with whatever has occurred that they don't think about that pain that they're in with endorphins and everything going through their mind. But they do remember what was said. And that's what, with me, what the doctor came in and said, Kevin, there's something wrong with your heart. We need to try and figure out what that is. That's what affected me the most. I was there for 6 days, 3 operations through the femoral artery and 3 stents put in my heart when I'm in my 40s. But that's what I remember the most, and that's what really affected me, was that doctor coming in. Am I going to see my 2 boys again? I remember tearing up. So all these things, when we're talking to folks, we never remember, what are they taking out of this? So I really learned a lot from that one. As this progressed, I was off work for a while, went back to work. Unfortunately, many of us in law enforcement go through a divorce. And I did. My wife, now ex-wife, is from Japan. And during the time of the divorce, she wrote a suicide note to each of my boys and was looking up on the computer how to load a gun. So when I wanted to stop by and see the boys, I never knew what I was coming up into. That was very, very difficult, a very difficult time. They're doing well. One of them suffers greatly. I have a 22-year-old who suffers greatly, though, with a mental illness. And everybody I talk about today, I have their permission and blessing to talk about, including Big Kev here. But my boy, we talk about mental illness, and he has been suicidal, engaging in self-harm, non-suicidal self-injury, diagnosed with depression and cluster B personality disorder. It's very difficult to watch this. He actually moved in with me, and he is doing better. But he had to come to that and want to get better. He spent some time in a hospital and is on some medication. So all these things with me, I did not see what was occurring with me, my own depression that I didn't want to admit. See, I could go to work and function at 100%. But when I went home, I had many, many days where I didn't want to do anything. I could sit on a couch for days at a time, not want to do anything, not walk my dogs, not want to see people, not want to text, nothing. Just want to be left alone. It wasn't until I really got, you know what, life's kind of passing me up. And I went and told my doctors and got some help that I started doing better. But this is what we see with folks, is we don't want to admit it. I had these macho jobs where I did not think, you know what, that's a weakness. Even though I'm talking to folks on the bridge, 4 to 6 cases a month I would handle on that Golden Gate Bridge. It's the #1 spot in the United States for loss of suicide. I wouldn't admit it to myself. So when you see that picture of him over the rail and that, any single one of us could be there. How are we doing? If we're not doing well, how are we going to help other folks? So when we met, you know, this was a life changer for us to be able to go through this. But it's a long road for those of us suffering and losing someone to suicide. Sometimes it's day by day, sometimes it's hour by hour. But we do make it through it.
Most people will look at my photo, and even when I look at that jovial kid, that smile, and it brings me back to that youthfulness, that time in life where all you think about is Christmas and your birthday. But what you don't see hidden behind that smile is that dark place that I lived in for pretty much my whole entire childhood. As early as age 5 years old, I knew I had a problem. So you always tell people, don't think your kids are too young, that they can't experience these things. I knew something was wrong with me. I knew something was going on with me. And I was living in that dark place. One of the biggest reasons why I lived in that dark place is because I was adopted. I found out early in life. My mom told me early in life I was adopted. She didn't want to lie to me. She knew I was going to figure it out anyway. I paid attention to a lot of stuff anyway. So she told me early in life that I was adopted. And one thing that affected me so greatly is I couldn't believe, even as a father, how could you give birth to me, look at me, and give me up? It was something that even to this day, I still struggle with the idea of understanding why. I can't understand it. If I'm so great, then how could you give me up? So it's something I struggle with. When you're born into an African American, when you're born, and you raised in an African American community, you learn early in life that this thing called mental health we don't talk about. Depression, suicide, it's not something we talked about as a community. My biggest thing was growing up, and I was always triggered every time I went out the door. Why? Because everybody I looked at my community, they looked alike. Cousins looked alike, mom looked like the sister, or somebody. People looked alike, right? I was lucky enough to be adopted to an African-American family, but I know I didn't look like my mom. I didn't look like my dad. I didn't look like my 2 older sisters. I didn't really know who I belonged to. So it was a struggle for me to watch other people look alike and watch people that belong to each other. I struggled with this every single day. I never wanted to talk about it. I was a smart kid who knew that he was lucky enough to be adopted. So I never wanted my adoptive mom or dad to ever feel like I was unappreciative, even though I hated the mere idea of knowing that I didn't belong to somebody. I hated everything about life. I avoided mirrors as a kid. I probably didn't know what I looked like because I hated the idea of everything about me. And it took me a while to develop the idea of that it was okay to be me. From the ages of 5 to 13, I struggled severely, and the only thing that really saved me was sports. My mom put me in sports. And I see a lot of athletes nowadays. I mean, we know who we are when we play in sports, right? We have this competitive edge. We know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. When I played basketball, I knew exactly point guard, dribble the ball up the court, facilitate the offense, play soccer, forward, score the goals, Like, I know who I am. Structurally, we know who we are when we are in these sports, but I didn't know who I was outside of sports. My parents put me in 5 different sports, so I stayed busy enough to really, I didn't have time to worry about how I really felt. It was always a game. It was always practice. Got up every day, went to school, practice after school, practice after that, games Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and church all day Sunday. So I didn't have time outside of nighttime that I was by myself. The only time I really struggled was at night. Every night I struggled like clockwork. Why? Because I'm by myself, I'm not around everybody. And I knew early in life to develop this idea that if nobody ever saw me struggling, and nobody would have going to ever ask. So I learned early to just keep it to myself. I learned early that if I'm crying, if I'm happy, nobody's going to secretly think that I'm sad. So I'm going to just act like I'm okay. I'm going to just always look like that. If I can look like that, nobody's going to ever think I'm sad. Just like when people are sad, we don't secretly think, oh, you're really happy. It's the same thing, right? So I knew exactly in life how to keep this going on. I knew how to be this jovial kid. I knew what to say, how to say it, when to say it before you even thought about it. My biggest fear was for somebody to ask me, are you okay? Growing up. That was my biggest fear. Like, am I okay? No, of course not. But I knew that if nobody was going to ask me that, I never would put my position until I ever have to deal with those emotions. I didn't handle any emotions. I never dealt with emotions. Nobody ever taught us how to deal with emotions, that they were important. So I didn't deal with them. I would literally internalize things that happened to me over my life. And I always say I find a door to open up on the inside of me, and I take that emotion, throw it in that door, and I close it. And that's what I did every day of my life up until March 11, 2005. I did that every single day. I lied about who I was. I never dealt with emotions. It wasn't a day of my life where I talked about my feelings, thought about talking about my feelings. I didn't talk to my family. I didn't talk to my friends. I lived a life based on what people wanted me to be. And I said what everybody needed me to say. I did all the right things. I dotted, all the right I's, and I crossed all the right T's to make sure that nobody would ever know how vulnerable and how much of a dark place that I was in. And it's one of the most painful things I've ever had to do in my life, trying to keep up with that every single day to make sure that nobody knows that you're in this dark place. It was a struggle. 13 years old is pretty much where that struggle kind of came to an end, and it kind of put me out in the forefront. I was amazing at everything and making it look like everything was okay until my parents divorced. Now, when my parents divorced, it was the first time in my life that I ever felt like I was adopted. That triggered everything on the inside of me, and everything that I was hidden, everything that I lied about, everything that I thought that I had, submerged somewhere on the inside in one of these doors. Now it was all in front of me. Anger, rage, things that I never even displayed. They came out, and they were there, and they were in front of me, and I had to deal with these emotions every single day. I went from a 2-parent home where we sat at a table, talked about family issues, went on vacations as a family, to when our parents divorced, I became my dad's caretaker. I lost my dad at 13. He no longer was my father. He became my little brother, and I've been the big brother in that relationship since. It's been a tough road ever since. And losing my parents to that divorce pretty much cycled everything, and everything about how I really felt about myself started, that day, June 11th, 2000, that was when I was a kid. So it pretty much started that day when my dad left the house for the last time. And I've been trying to figure out things since, spiraling out of control, not really dealing with emotions, lying about who I am. But I never wanted to deal with it. It was always easier to not talk about it. I didn't have a community where we talked about it. I went to every assembly growing up, snuck in almost every assembly. We never talked about mental health, never talked about suicide. So at 14, when I had my first attempt, I was kind of just on my own with it. My uncle left his family van at the house one day, and I remember getting it, and I remember going to find the keys in my mom's room, and I knew exactly where I was going to go, exactly what I was going to do, and I was going to drive that van off the cliff. And I went up to the spot, young, never drove a car before, never knew that it was probably going to be a guardrail, because you can't just drive off a cliff, and I wasn't expecting the guardrail there. And I smacked into that guardrail, and I remember driving home, and I never talked about that being my first attempt. It took me probably 25 years, like literally, to say that was my first attempt. And my mom didn't know about that until about a couple years ago. So for all those years, I kind of kept it to myself. I went home and acted like I was going home for a joyride, and actually, I was in pain, the darkest place that I've ever been in my life. And it just was getting worse and worse and worse. I was lying about everything, who I was. I was trying to transition, trying to figure out exactly what I needed to do, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't figure it out. I had nobody to talk to, nothing out there that I could identify to say, he's struggling too. I was 15 years old before I saw a man cry for the first time. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know it was an emotion that we were supposed to even deal with. I didn't even know men actually were supposed to cry. So you blanket on all these emotions, and I knew that I had to keep everything in. I was lying about who I was. I was being this front man. But then I had to keep it together because I had my family that was dependent on me. I couldn't buckle down. Transitioning out of junior high, you'd ask me growing up what I wanted to be. I didn't have any plans growing up. I knew that I was going to be dead. Assembly, what are you going to be when you grow up? Dead? I hope they don't ask me, because that's exactly where I felt. That's exactly where I was at. I was in that much of a dark place. When I graduated high school, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan for anything. I was just lucky enough to graduate. I was trying to fail out of college, out of high school, because I was used to that structure. So we get used to that structure. When you're in a dark place, you're used to that structure. I got up, went to school. After school, had basketball practice. After basketball practice, I had baseball practice. Like, I had a structure. Getting out of high school, I remember somebody whispered to me, you can't play 5 sports no more. I didn't know what I was going to do in my life. I was so afraid to be an adult because I was so afraid of myself. I was so afraid of what I know that I could do. I was structured in that system of knowing that people would see me when I went to school and practice. But now that I'm an adult, I've got free time. I can drive a car. I can go away from people and nobody can know where I'm at. I was afraid of that. I was afraid of me being with me alone. And that was always a struggle for me.
So this day, an average day for me, out on the road, out on patrol, and I received a call of a man on the sidewalk saying that he's going to jump, and he's on a cell phone talking to loved ones. I said, okay. Whenever I get these calls, I say a little prayer to myself that this is going to go okay when I get down there. So, mind you, I had no training when I first got into this, working for the Highway Patrol. I wondered why a lot of officers did not want to work down on the bridge. I soon found out why. We didn't have any training. What a disservice to those folks, and what a disservice to us who were going down there to do this. I think, what do I say? What do I do? It was awful. It wasn't until sometime later I went through crisis intervention team training, CIT, and then many years later when I went through the FBI crisis negotiators course, which most folks don't even get the opportunity to go to. I just did it on a whim. I got lucky enough to do that. But in this case here, I get the call and start working my way down there, and then I'm on the motorcycle, so I go down the sidewalk, and as I near the North Tower, I see him standing there, matches the description. He's still on a cell phone. So I stop about 50 feet away or so. And I have a different way of approaching. Maybe you've all have seen instances where someone is on top of a building or on a bridge and going to jump, and maybe a citizen or a fireman or law enforcement rushes in and grabs them. I never do that. I think it takes so much courage to go over that rail. Can you imagine the courage that it takes to come back and face everything again? So I think if I can get them to do that on their own, without lying to them or anything else, having them make up their mind they want to live, their chances of success later on in life are much greater. So that's my goal. But he's on this side of the sidewalk when I see him. So I stop about 50 feet away. As I'm getting off of my motorcycle, he looks my direction.
So most people look at this photo, and the biggest question that most people ask me is, how does somebody get to this point, right? Like, how does somebody, and I didn't get up March 11, 2005 and just, decide, I'm just going to end it. This is from 22 years of not dealing with your problems, 22 years of not dealing with emotions, 22 years of lying about who I was, and 22 years of living in a dark place, not realizing that I didn't have to live there. So when I got up this day, March 11, 2005, all the emotions that I put on the inside of me, that I put in that door, every emotion was readily accessible to me that morning. And I couldn't deal with it. It was a type of pain that equivalent to a semi-truck being parked on your chest. So when people say they're in pain, believe them. It's excruciating. And I couldn't breathe that day, and I was tired of being my own motivational speaker. I knew that when I got out there to that bridge, that I didn't come here to talk. I would have liked somebody to stop me beforehand, but once I got to that bridge, that was it. I got to that point, I got out there, and once I looked and found a good spot, I looked in the water, and once I saw in the water, most people see water, but I saw peace. My peace was not having to be a burden anymore, not having to lie about who I was, and not having to wake up every single day in this pain, not have to wonder if I was going to be able to get through. That's the peace I saw. Now, from the outside, your peace, you may just see water. But when you're in that dark place, you just want to get out of pain. That morning, I didn't feel love or loved. I couldn't feel my mom's love, and she loved me astronomically. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel the world's love. I couldn't feel my daughter's love. I couldn't feel anybody's love when I tried to feel it. But the problem is, love has to go inside. Love just can't be outside. I only had love on the outside. We were never taught to have self-deposits of that love. So I didn't have self-deposits of love on the inside. So when I went inside of myself that day, March 11, 2005, what was there? Pain, envy, rage, regret, all the stuff that I hide from the world. It wasn't any love there. So when I got there and I took that leap after that voice, after I heard that voice, I was content on hitting that water. But I was distracted. Luckily, I was distracted. And I remember as he yelled something, and I caught myself and grabbed the railing, and I put myself on his cord.
So like Kev said, as I got off of my motorcycle, it looks like he looks at me, and then he just runs over and leaps. The rail's only 4 foot tall. As he leaps, I really didn't have anything to do. I know that when folks are doing a countdown, I think where I work and what I do, folks are hanging on. Maybe they put a foot out, they're looking down at the water, and they start doing this heavy breathing. They're getting ready to go. So what I would typically do is yell and clap and make a really loud noise, get them out of this countdown. I didn't have that opportunity, but I yelled something, and he reached out, caught the rail, swung around, and slammed into those bars there. Miracle number one. I've never seen anything like this, to be able to fully jump over that, grab it, and come back and hit that. He lands on that little bitty pipe. So I thought he was gone. I ran up there. And then I see his white T-shirt through the slots, so I step back. I have a little different way, I think, than a lot of folks, is I stay back and I raise my right hand. My gun is here. I raise my right hand and say, hello, I'm Kevin. Is it okay if I come up and talk with you for a while? I'm not Sergeant Kevin Richard Briggs, California Highway Patrol. Who cares? I'm just Kevin. That's all. I'm going to personalize everything. If they allow me to use their first name, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I want to do. Everything is personalized. So he wanted nothing to do with me.
I was upset. You come here with a plan, right? I didn't come here to talk. I didn't come this far to continue to be in pain and not alone be in this position. It's only three things in the world I hate, right? 3 things in the world I hate, right? I hate being lost. I got lost from the Bay Bridge to Golden Gate Bridge because I got directions that were wrong, right? That's the first thing I hate. Second thing I hate is heights, right? We're 220 feet in the air, right? And the third thing I hate the most out of all of them, I don't like being cold. This is March in San Francisco with a wind chill. So I pretty much have, in one day, put myself in the worst possible position that I can. And his voice is still trying to get my attention. And I'm mad. I'm literally yelling at him at least 10 minutes. I'm yelling at the top of my lungs. I'm not holding on. There's nothing supporting my back. There's nothing behind me but a 220 feet fall. I'm 4 seconds from completing the one thing that I came here to do. All I have to do is a one small nudge back. That's all I got to do. So I'm upset with him for interrupting me and messing up my plans. But something on the inside of me after 10 minutes, and he's not like he's making me feel like I'm stupid or anything. It's something about his voice. It's something about it. Something on the inside of me just says, why do you even care?
So eventually, he allowed me to come up and speak with him. We have to do a check, right? It's always officer safety. But after I did that, I don't like this. This bugs me, and I've seen people do this even in rooms like this where someone's sitting down and people are standing above. I don't like this at all. So for a lot of the time, I was kneeling down on that fun-filled cement like this, speaking with him. I want to be at eye level. And once, it's something when you look in people's eyes. I see the pain and the hurt, and I've seen it in a lot of folks. And it's very brutal to see. But if they can talk, if they want to talk, that's a good sign. And he wanted to talk. So my job now is to listen. We use a lot of active listening skills, validation, normalization, and a lot of minimal encouragers. Wow. Is that right? Really? I'm not going to interrupt him. Not going to say, hold on. I'm not taking notes. Me personally, I turn off my cell phone. I turn off my radio. I don't want to be bothered. Everything I do is about him. All the things that I told you I've been involved with, one is very difficult for me to talk about. Usually I don't. He knows this, but abuse when I was 8 to 10 years old from a neighbor. And it was very, very severe. It went over a long time. It took me decades to talk about this and to get some help, but I've been through EMDR, and that was very, very brutal. But all of these things that I've been through, I do not talk about when I'm talking to folks, because it is not about me. It is not the Kevin Briggs Show. Now, where is it now? It is about them, and that's what I want this to be about when we're talking to folks, is about them. So he wanted to talk. I was just there to listen. No judgment, no comparing anything, but just being there for him. And, you can see by this photo, he really doesn't care. His left hand's in his pocket. His right hand, because he's cold, is up between his T-shirt and his skin. So a big gust of wind, and he's done. So this is where we were for 90 some odd minutes.
It's probably the most unsafe position I've ever put myself in, but it was the most safest place that I've ever been in, because it allowed me He created a safe place to me. In the midst of this unsafetyness, he created this safe place for me to be able to talk. And something on the side of me said, why does he even care? And that was like something pulling me and saying, Kevin, you can talk. Kevin, you can let it go. And I let it go. And it was the first time in my life that I ever had a conversation about me. He learned everything from I started at the age of 5 and I worked myself all the way up to the age of 22. 17 years of pretty much my life, the pain that I was in, the dark places that I've been through, that I didn't see light, everything that I could possibly talk about and everything that he would, listen to, I poured out. And I didn't know it was 92 minutes. It seemed like it was forever up there, but it made me feel like no matter what I was saying, he was going to be willing to listen. If I had another 92 minutes, he acted like he was just going to listen. He never interrupted me. It was never, I know, hey, this is just taking a lot of time. I mean, we got the traffic. We had a standstill. It was just about me and him. And somehow he normalized this situation to where it was like us two people sitting on a couch. And I think that it has a lot to do with, it had nothing to do with his first responder qualities. I mean, I know you have a lot of great accolades and a lot of great things he's done as far as being a first responder, but he was human. That was the biggest thing, and I think that that's the biggest takeaway that anybody that sees this photo has to understand. When you see this photo, you don't see a black, deranged 22-year-old man and a white police officer. You see two humans. And that's what I want people to see. I want you to see two humans because he treated me like a human. And that's the only reason why I'm here, to be able to talk to you in front of you. The only reason why I'm able to have the accomplishments that I have in my life, because he took the time to just be human. And it's not who he is, it's the things that he's been through in his life, as you can hear. And he uses that. He didn't use that against him. It's the things that he went through in his life that gives him this compassion that I needed to be there. You could have sent me any first responder in the world, and they wouldn't have saved my life. It had to be him. It had to be him. He had to be the things that he went through in his life in order to connect with me on that level of connection.
So when we were talking over that time, my mind's turning. I'm thinking, oh my God, if I lose this guy, it's brutal. It's very, very brutal to see this and have this occur in front of you. I hate it each and every time, but I did this 4 to 6 times a month for many, many years. I got to find a hook. We have hooks and we have hot buttons. Hooks are things that we like to talk about. Hot buttons are things we're going to try to avoid. And when I list them up for people, I always put the government up there first as a hot button, because that's a hot button for a lot of folks. But I had to find a hook with him. What could I offer him to want to be here? Because I could easily reach through and grab him and then have other officers rush up and we could pull him over. But I want him to be around here for a very, very long time. And in my own mind, what can I do to make him want to come back over? We started talking about his kid. Oh, what's her name? And we went more and more into this. Found out she had a birthday coming up the next month. We started talking about that more. Kev, don't you want to be around for her? Now, I did say something that could lead to shame, but I thought it was appropriate at the time. And I said, Kev, if you go today, how do you think your daughter's going to feel when she grows up? That may be wrong, but I thought it was appropriate at the time. And we're thinking of this, of what can we do in that time when it's freezing cold out and it's very difficult. But we talked for quite a while. And then I said, brother, I'm going to take a break. And this is fine to do. But I said, I'm only going to take a break. You promise me not to do anything until I come back up here. Because I think they have so many things going through their mind that maybe they're not hearing everything I'm saying. So I want to give them some time to think. He agreed to it. It's just a verbal warning, really doesn't mean a thing. Verbal warning. Oof, I'm back making a traffic stop. It's just a verbal agreement. As a motor, we don't do verbal warnings, okay? It's just a verbal agreement, and it doesn't mean anything, but it means something to me, and I think it meant something to him. So I stepped back about 15 feet, watched him for a sec, And then I try to turn my head, give him a little bit of peace. Gave him a few minutes. And then again, I raised my hand. Kev, is it okay if I come back up? He holds the ball. I want his permission. He allowed me to come back up. So what do you think about going on today? You got your daughter. I know you're going through an extremely tough time right now. Okay? But you'll have the opportunity for things to get better. Let's talk about your daughter some more. And we did for a while. And I said, Kev, I think it's time for you to come back over and get you back to your daughter. And he said yes. And just before this occurred is about when this photo was taken. So I helped him come back over. And then when he got back over, I congratulated him. Well done. And then I asked him before we left that scene, what did I do that helped this situation? And what did I do that maybe wasn't so good, that could hurt the situation? Because I want to learn, as I do today, I want to learn more how I can help other people. He thought about it very, very briefly. And then he said, you listened. You let me speak, and you listened. So why did it take for this man and so many folks to get up to here and other places for one of us to listen? Okay, I couldn't fix anything, and we know this, but we can certainly be there for one another and listen. And I think that's my mantra: listen to understand, to try and understand. So we get him into a vehicle, and he goes down to a local hospital. In this case, he went to San Francisco General Hospital. I never follow up with folks. I wouldn't even know what to say. Oh, remember me? I saved you. No. For one thing, I don't use the word save. I didn't save anybody. I didn't rush into a burning building, anything like that. I was there on a dark day and helped them through that, as any one of us can do. And that was it. Case closed. A few days later, I received a letter from his mother. And I'd like to read that to you. Dear Mr. Briggs, nothing will erase the events of March 11th, but you are one of the reasons Kevin is still with us. I truly believe Kevin was crying out for help. He has been diagnosed, once again, with a mental illness for which he has been properly medicated. I adopted Kevin when he was only 6 months old, completely unaware of any hereditary traits. But thank God, now we know. Kevin is straight, as he says. We truly thank God for you, sincerely indebted to you, Narvella Berthia. And then there's a P.S. on the bottom. When I visited San Francisco General Hospital that evening, you were listed as the patient. Boy, did I have to straighten that one out. Thank God she did. Yes. Yes. But my time is done with him after that. I pray for them and hope they do well. This is about helping folks long before they get up to that. We're also taking care of ourselves, and we are going to talk about that more.
So we talked about us getting up to the bridge, and we're going to take a little break just so you can guys get a little recap, take a bathroom break, get some coffee or something, and then we'll come back second half, and we'll talk about the transitioning from after the bridge and what we do now. We thank you for your time, and we thank you for listening.
So we'll take a 10-minute break.
10 years ago when I lost my dad, nobody talked about it. And it was a really hard time. It was a really lonely time because we all just did what we needed to do to get through it. And all I wanted to do was talk, and nobody wanted to do that. So when I found Kevin's song, I found a place to connect with people in a safe space to talk about, you know, my grief and just kind of my journey through this.
I was introduced to Kevin's song in March of 2017. I had the opportunity to meet with a therapist the morning after my husband suicided. She gave me the program from the 2016 conference, and I reached out to Gail and asked if there was anyone who could possibly come and speak at my husband's funeral. So Leo came to speak, and I think he brought a lot of peace to a lot of people. None of us really realized that Rick, my husband, was that ill, and so it came as a great shock to everyone. And then from that point, Gail was lovely and had called me and reached out, and I knew that I was going to need to get involved.
My wife Gail and I co-founded Kevin's Song after losing our son to suicide in March of 2013. Like many of the people you'll meet during the course of this weekend, Gail and I responded to our grief by deciding to do something about the suicide epidemic. This conference is one of the results of that decision, and we're thrilled and grateful for all of us to be here this weekend.
I think that there's hope. I think the more we talk about it, the more it will be addressed, and there will be hope that lives will be saved.
It can feel lonely sometimes because the subject is so heavy and serious, but to get together with a conference like this and all the folks who are here to contribute, to support, to learn, it really feels like you're part of a larger picture, and that's really inspiring and motivating.
As a researcher, I often go to conferences and present data, statistics, and it's very cold sometimes. And so here I have the opportunity to talk about research and best practices, but actually think about how this can be applied in the real world.
As clinicians, it's one thing to know the research, but it's another thing to experience, you know, the life experience. And so we've been able to marry those two in a way that I think people find valuable.
Caring matters a lot. Caring about one another matters a lot. Small doses of caring about one another can take somebody from a catastrophic level of risk down a notch or two, and that can be the difference between life and death.
We don't have all the answers, and I do believe that we learn more when we share our stories and when we speak to one another. And it starts with a conversation. Kevin's Song has started this conversation in this community and beyond.
The more that we can talk about it and get people to the places they need to be, whether it's for prevention or just even the support network for people such as myself who have to pick up the pieces afterward and, you know, continue living. I think it's really important to let them know they're not alone and to help provide resources that can help get through the dark days and share stories.
And I believe the more people know, you know, the better they are aware of picking up on the signs that you may notice in somebody that you love, that you may notice in your neighbor or your neighbor's kids or your kids' friends. And I think if we are all aware of what to look for and we're kind of like all eyes on deck, that we can create a community where we're looking out for each other.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear? Well, oh, someone will come running, and I know they'll take you home. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around. You will be found.
There's a place where we don't have to feel unknown. And every time that you call out, you're a little less alone. If you only say the word, from across the silence, your voice is heard. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. Out of the shadows, morning is breaking, and all is new. All is new. It's filling up the empty, and suddenly I see that all is new. All is new. You were not alone. 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 Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need someone to carry you, when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. Let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. If you only look around, you will be found. Even when the dark comes crashing through, you will be found. You need someone to carry you. You will be found. You will be found.
All right, I think we're ready to get back rolling. So, like I said before we took a break, Kev went down to SF General Hospital. I went about my business, and that's generally the end of it. Years later, I was asked by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to receive a Lifesavers Award and to fly out to New York City. I turned it down, said thank you very much. I really didn't want to fly out to New York City or accept an award. It's eerie, and I didn't like it. Besides that, there's other people that do the same type of work that I do. They called me a couple times, and I said no. Then they went to my commander, and yes, I am going out to New York City to receive this award. They played the ball right. Then they asked me, is there somebody you saved? And you know how I feel about that word. Is there somebody you saved that we could bring out and present you with this award? I said, no, I'm not going to follow up with somebody. And can you come out and present me with an award? It's horrible. No. But I did have that letter from his mother. So after they again went through my commander, I said, here's what I'll do. I will go out, because I had the letter with the return address. I will go over to Oakland, and if his mother, Narvella Berthea, still lives there, I will contact her, and she could be like my third-party intermediary to get a hold of Kev. So I went out there, knocked on the door. She answers, and nobody wants law enforcement in front of their door. Bad news. Once she found out who I was and what it was about, she gave me a big hug, invited me in, and we sat and chat for quite some time. She reached out to Kev.
So most people, when you think about somebody that goes to the Golden Gate Bridge, you figure, okay, that's a big traumatic thing, right? You know, you got to probably get some help after that, right? Go some therapy, counseling, something, right? I went to the bridge, I went to the hospital, San Francisco General, and then I went to the Fremont Medical Center for 13 days. I had to get back into the facets of eating and sleeping because I stopped doing that because I was preparing myself to die. So I had to get myself back into those facets. But when I got home, my mom, she never, my adopted mom, she's never lied to me. She's always been straight up with me. And she showed me that this photo, I'm a ball player. I played 5 sports growing up. I've been inspired to be, a ball player my whole life. We always want to be front page of the paper, right? That's something that every ball player wants to do. But when I found that I was front page of the paper for something like this, I immediately shut down. And here's why. I had spent my whole life up until this point making sure that everybody knew that I had it together. I was a popular guy. 3 days before I went to the bridge, I went to a birthday party where it wasn't even my birthday party. The guy whose birthday was put my face on his flyer so more people can come. So I never had a problem with popularity. I mean, I was this jovial guy that everybody knew. I had an answer to everything. But when people saw this picture, I knew that they were going to see me. They didn't see my face. But anybody that knows me, they know those Air Max 95s, right? They know me from the back, and I didn't know who I was going to go back to because I spent every ounce of energy pretending. And the one thing about that is, then who are you? I didn't know who I was, so I lied. I continued to lie, and I didn't go to outpatient. I didn't go to therapy. You think that somebody to this extent you accept that you have a problem, Kevin? I never accepted. I still didn't accept I have an issue. Drove myself to the Golden Gate Bridge, jumped off of it. Still didn't accept that I had an issue. Took me 8 years. During that 8-year time frame, I had another 10 attempts. Still wanted to die, still was living a lie, back in a dead-end marriage. That was a triggering marriage that was horrible for me. Grandfather passed away. One grandfather passed away in 2005, which was triggering. Another grandfather passed away in 2007. I went through custody battles in 2008, 2009, my own divorce in 2011. I mean, it was a show. By the year 2013, I was telling myself I was back in my New Year's resolution was the same as 2005. Get yourself out of pain. 2013 came around. I knew I was going to die that year. I knew 2013 was going to be my year to not ever have to deal with pain again. And I just knew it. I didn't know the date. I didn't know the time. My mom's birthday is I just knew that her birthday was coming around, and I knew that if I could just stay around for her birthday is February 15th. And, so I remember taking her for her birthday, just like in 05. I did the same thing in 05. It was like deja vu, because the same thing in 05. I took my mom to the birthday, then I drove her off, and I was saying goodbye. Same thing in 2013. I was doing the same thing. But this time, she was just talking to me about, she said she was online, and she had won some radio station tickets, right? This is my mom's story. This is the true story, right? Because she knew she couldn't talk to me about the bridge. I didn't want to talk about this day. I didn't deal with this picture. I didn't talk about this to family and friends. I've only saw this picture up until that point maybe twice. My mom showed me when I came home from the hospital, and the second time I saw this photo, my ex was using it against me in child custody. So I walked into a room with a judge, and I had to explain a photo that I haven't even accepted that it was me in the photo. And that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever do in my life. But I still didn't want to deal with this day. And my mom said she wants some radio station tickets to New York, of all places in the world, right? I'm like, I've never been, back then we called it the Big Apple, right? So it's like, I've never been to the Big Apple. I'm, thinking about, ending my life. So, I don't have nothing to lose. I'm in this dead-end marriage. Why not? So, we, took on my mom's offer. She was banking on me, hoping that I didn't ask questions. Because she knows I don't ask questions. You can ask me questions, but me personally, I don't ask questions. It's like, what's the point? We're going to either do it or we're not. So she was hoping that I would just get on a plane, never asking questions, and that's exactly what I did. I got on a plane, boarded a plane in New York. I had no idea why I was going, who I was going to meet, or what was going to happen when I got there. I got there, and I remember getting off the plane, walking down, and I remember it was a guy, driver there, holding my name, right? That is an impactful feeling if you've never felt that in your life before, waiting on somebody's waiting there with your name. That was like, I felt like I made it, got into the limo, and it took us to the hotel. And at the same time, I'm with my ex. So we're just kind of going through the motions. I don't know what's going on. We get to the hotel room, and I remember they tell me I have a phone call from the radio station. Radio station calls me up and says, and I'm about to bust their bubble and say, I'm not my mom. I'm thinking I'm about to bust their bubble. And they like excited to hear from me. They say, hey, Kevin. I don't know how they know my name, but that's whatever. Like, we want to interview you live on the air about your 8-year reunion with your first responder. And I'm like, hold on one second. Let me call you right back. So I call my mom. Mom, why am I in New York? Just like this. She says, oh, yeah, you're going to meet Briggs, the man in the photo. That's just what she said. So now I call the radio station back, and I have to go live on air and talk about March 11, 2005. But here's the thing. I've never talked about March 11, 2005 in my life. Never. This is the first time live on the radio am I talking about March 11, 2005, and it opened me up, and I didn't even know exactly what I was opening myself up to. I finished that interview, got off of that, and I'm going to the Columbus Circle. Now I know why I'm there. Now this anxiety is built in because I know I'm going to meet the man in the photo. Now, what people have to realize is March 11, 2005, my head stayed down the whole time. My eyes stayed closed. So if you would have told me March 11, 2005, while I was in this moment, that a white cop was talking to me, this conversation would have probably been different. You got to realize something. I'm a black man from Oakland, California. I've never had a good run-in with law enforcement, ever, in my life. So if I would have opened my eyes, I love you, Briggs, and you know that. Like, I'm telling you, because it's just the dynamic from where I'm from and the environment of all I know. If I would have opened my eyes and known that's who I would have saw, I wouldn't be here today. That's how important that conversation was. That's how important me keeping my eyes closed. So when I met this man for the first time, I'm like, oh, I got to meet the man for the first time. Now I know he's a cop, so my anxiety is, again, now I'm like, I don't know if he, how he's going to feel when I meet him, if he's going to want me to bow at him, kiss his feet or something, because technically he did kind of save me. But, when I shook his hand, I remember seeing him when I got in there where everybody's all decked out. And I remember looking at him, and I shook his hand for the first time. And something changed inside of me instantaneously. And I remember his captain was in the background, and he said, Sean, and I got to say this, because we had to get on stage, and Sean said something like, oh shit, like, because he has to get on stage. Something happened in that moment. See, in that moment, I realized that they were human. That he wasn't just a cop, he was law enforcement, and this was just his job. So our relationship that night and me shaking his hand, he changed the dynamic of how I looked at all law enforcement that night. Him and Sean, and I'll never forget that. And I always thank him for that, because now I'm able to go around and talk to a whole room full of law enforcement and just see them as just people. I had the opportunity to meet him. We got into that cocktail hour, and I got in there, all these fancy rooms, all this decked out place, and it was all nice. And I remember sitting down at the front table, and I remember sitting there and not knowing what to expect or anything. And I remember Briggs gets up there, Yahoo documentary goes up, and I'm sitting at my table minding my own business. And it was the first time that the photo was posted on, it was plastered on this big time. You know, think of a drive-in movie theater. I don't know why this jumbo screen behind us was so big, but it was huge, right? And I'm sitting there, and the audience goes, like they gasp for air, and I'm trying to figure out, what are they looking at? And it's me, the photo of me, and this is the third time I'm seeing it in my life. 3 times the charm, right? Because I look at it before I get on that stage, and I accepted it was me in the photo. That, something happened. When you accept who you are, something changes about you. You're no longer living in that pain anymore. It's like I accepted who I was in that photo, and that propelled me. That gave me a certain type of strength that I didn't even know I needed when I got on that stage. I got on that stage, and I talked openly for the first time ever in front of an audience about March 11, 2005. Like, the first time, everything that I have been taught about being a man, about not being vulnerable, about not showing emotions, I did the opposite. In New York. Everything that I was taught, everything that I saw growing up, I did the opposite. Everything that I tried to hide from the world, I did the opposite of that on that stage. And for the first time in my life, I was received, but I was received as Kevin. I wasn't received as the man that was trying to be what everybody else needed. I was received as just me being myself, the vulnerable, emotional, drawn person that I am, the empathetic lover of the humanity and all the world that I am. That's what they got, and they got my heart that evening. And after that, it was like a standing ovation, and I didn't know, I've never got a standing ovation in my life, so I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if it was like a fire or something. I didn't know what to expect. I remember coming down, and I remember coming back, trying to get back to my table, and it was like a line starting to form, and I was looking at him. I didn't know if it was like the buffet line. I'm like, well, we should be first, right? But it was a lady standing in line, and she stood in line, and it was a group of people standing in line and was waiting, but it was the first lady standing in line. She was all teared up. Clearly, she's been crying this whole time. So I'm an emotional person. I'm like, I don't want to look at this lady because she's been crying. She's going to make me cry. But she said, I need to talk to you. I told my husband that I have the courage, that I have to talk to you. I have to tell you exactly what's on my heart. And she came up to me, and I've probably had the opportunity to talk to probably thousands of mothers year to date. She's the very first mother. She came up to me, and she said, she will always be the reason why I will fight for everything I can for mental health, amongst everything. She came up to me and she said, I haven't slept in 5 years. She said, I haven't slept, not a night, not a day, not a moment. She said, my son Jacob lost his battle 5 years ago. I haven't slept. And she said, tonight, Kevin, I'm going to sleep. And you know why I'm going to sleep? She looked me dead in my eyes. She said, the only reason why I'm going to sleep is because you told your story. And I can better now understand what Jacob was going through. And you want to talk about a moment that changes your life? It's that one, because 2 things happened in that moment. I realized, 1, I wasn't alone, right? And 2, it was so much bigger than me. So much bigger than me. It was so much bigger than me. How could the worst day of my life get anybody hope? Like, lady, that's the worst day of my life. You saying that you're going to sleep tonight because my pain? Something happened in me that night. I mean, I had to cycle up my whole life. Like, here I was wanting to die, and now a piece of me just was screaming to live. A piece of me was screaming for change. A piece of me, but I had to make decisions. I'm sitting at the table with one of my biggest triggers, my ex-wife. I brought her to New York with me, one of my biggest triggers. My life in California is in shambles, but here I am. Somehow emerged. I call it a New York Kevin. New York Kevin has kind of emerged, and I'm like, California Kevin wants to die, but New York Kevin wants to live. I got to figure out the balance in this. And I went back. That was May 7th of 2013, almost 10 years ago now. And I went back home. May 21st, 2013, I woke up, and it was the first day I didn't want to die. My whole life. May 21st, 2013. I woke up, and I didn't want to die. I was more shocked than anybody, and I didn't know. I was like, this is how it feels? I don't know what I did yesterday, but I need to do this for the rest of my life. And I went on a mission, and I started eliminating things and people and places and everything that didn't everything that didn't feel right, everything that didn't feel like peace, everything that caused me pain, it had to go. That's why I tell people, if you want change, you got to be willing to change everything. Like, it can't just be the small changes. You got to change habits. You got to change everything your routine. I had to change all the things that were causing me not to want to live. I was making dead decisions. I had to start making decisions of somebody that wanted to live. So the job had to go. The friends had to go. The wife had to go. Right? The family had to go. Like, all the things that I lied about, all these things had to go. And that's what I did. I said, I put on a board. I said, people, I just want to encourage people. I just want to help people. I put it on a board. That was in May. I said, I just want to help people. Our first big interview, and the second time that I went back to the bridge, we were doing a People magazine shoot. I tell people my story because if it can change for me, it can change for anybody. Because in 2013, I was up to 22 different times that I told myself, you know what, I'm not doing this. I can't. And so I guess I'm meant to be here. And it's not, the bridge wasn't the first time or the second time. But I've done this. I've been around this. I've been in that dark place. That's why I understand it so well. And that's why I'm able to communicate from that place and to give people the idea that exists. That it's real, that it's a real place, that people are dealing with their emotions and they can't get out of that place. It's hard to navigate once you've then been there for so long. That's why the compassion is important. That's why just being there for somebody is important, because we don't know how to be there for ourselves. That's why supporting in a silence place is important. Sometimes you're not going to always have everything to say. You couldn't solve my problems. If you'd have came up there and tried to solve my problems, we wouldn't be here. He created a position for me to be safe enough so I can hear my own problems. Because the moment we feel heard, we get healed. The moment. But we gotta be heard. You gotta create these places, and you created that place for me.
So we all know in this room right now, there are folks suffering greatly. It's like a candle. If one of us is that bright light for someone, we truly can make a difference. Like Kev said, nothing I could do if he wanted to go. He takes 2-inch step back. But it's also about connecting long before we get up to that, okay? Those in the mental health profession and first responders, we think we don't need help. Boy, did I need help. And I've done everything, including a stellate ganglion block, injections in my neck to try to get my brain back so I don't have these nightmares of this guy right here in my face, until we want to start to get better and then have someone who will listen to us. Not that we can fix everything or anything, but at least we can have this conversation. That's what this is about. So as you can see, and as we're doing right here, I love working with him. It's really cool. I think we cross a lot of bases, cover a lot of things, but it's also very, very genuine. There's also, why don't people seek help? I have a lot of shame. Shame of my cancer, shame of what happened and the brutality of what happened when I was 8 to 10 years old. Okay, my own ego. I was a motor cop. I jumped out of planes in the military, worked at San Quentin. My own ego even wouldn't allow me to talk about things. And being vulnerable, in my jobs, you were not vulnerable. That's a weakness, and we don't show weakness. It's getting better and better. But until we look at these and go, you know what, I'm going to cross those off the list. And also denial. This can't be happening to me. Don't you know who I am? That ego part. It kicked me down hard. It really did. But once I started to talk about it and have people who were just there to listen, it was very interesting speaking to a psychiatrist. It took me decades to see a psychiatrist. And it was so cool. I was so afraid to do this, but this lady did not stay behind her desk. I do not like barriers, as you probably can see. Do not like barriers. But she came out from behind her desk and sat sideways. And I even researched it. There's studies that show if you take that barrier away, you're going to have a much better result. So she didn't dig into and get details about what happened to me. She just let me talk, and I only offered a bit. But that's when she recommended some therapy, EMDR. And being this type A conservative cop, I really had to let go of a lot of things and open my mind up, and we have to do this if we want to get better. Starts with the conversation, and then what are we going to do? So there's a lot of things that we can share and do with one another. I do want to tell you, though, not everything is peachy. This gentleman here, Jason Garber, age 32, met him on July 22nd, 2013. He was over the rail of that bridge. I'm the supervisor. We get a call of a man over the rail. Golden Gate Bridge security guards were already on scene talking to him. Jason was sitting down on what we call the cord. It's an I-beam over the rail. And the particular Golden Gate Bridge security guard speaking with him was very, very good, an older gentleman who was good. So typically, when we come up, we take over. All my officers were busy. So when I got there, I'm the first CHP, a California Highway Patrol officer there. I let him stay, the Golden Gate Bridge Patrol officer, because he was doing a good job. This gentleman is a genius, well-versed in a variety of topics, was not under the influence of anything, so intelligent, just a joy to talk to. But he had been suffering for a very long time, and he just couldn't take it anymore. My job is to save people. Couldn't do it that day. After an hour of speaking with him, just an extremely intelligent young man. He was sitting on that cord, and I'm right here, like Kev is. And he just leaned to his right and was gone. So everything isn't peachy all the time. We lose folks. And I want to let you know that those of us first responders, it breaks us. It's tough. It's very difficult for me to talk about. And I want you to know, when I teach this, and I teach negotiators, and I'm talking about this, and we say, how do we continue on? Why would I go back and do that job? This sounds egotistical. It does. But if I'm not going to do it, who is? If you're not going to do it, who is? We need to take time for ourselves to process this. I had a female officer lose an individual, and she was having a lot of troubles getting past this. So we gave her time off, and she took some time off and saw a counselor through the Employee Assistance Program. And she came back, and she's doing a great job. We want to do a good job. There's a part of me that always thinks, what could I have done better? What could I have done different? But then there's another part of me that says, you know what? They made that decision. I didn't do this. They made that decision. And it's brutal. This whole thing is brutal. It's tough to talk about. But we continue on. I consider myself a suicide loss survivor based on him and another one that I was speaking to at a loss besides my grandfather. But we think about, what would they want? And I've talked to a lot of folks who were suicidal, and they would tell me, I love my family, I wouldn't hurt anybody. I just cannot do this any longer. They're in so much pain. So, this is the really tough part of this, and it may even trigger folks, but we got to get through this. We got to start with ourselves and then be there for one another. I spoke with this man's family. He's from New Jersey. I called his family because I knew the coroner would not call his family for a couple of days. Called out there, spoke with his father, and it was just a horrible conversation to have. The very next day when I came into work, I get a call, and I'm thinking it's his father again. But it wasn't. It was the family rabbi. And he goes, Kevin, do you know why I'm calling you? No, sir. The family's worried about you. They lost their son, but they're worried about me. That's how brutal this is. But we can be there for one another. That's what this is about, and starting that conversation. Are we going to lose some folks? We might, but we can certainly try our best and live the best lives that we can. So, being with heart issues and the cancers and everything else, I really had to tone things down. Like, you know what? I got to make up something for me. Personally, I'm not going to read a 300-page self-help book. I'm just not. But I made this for me. So many of us give. We need to start thinking about ourselves and how are we doing. So I put myself on the top. Maybe that's egotistical. Maybe. Or at least equal to what we're giving out. Okay? Our own self-compassion, our own self-care, our own self-advocate. Because when I first wanted to see someone, my regular doctor, I wrote him an email. I am not suicidal, but I would like to see a psychiatrist or psychologist and talk about this. He wrote me an email back and said, well, since you're not actively suicidal, I kind of don't recommend it. I have the letter. I'm happy to show it to you. I carry it with me. I do. It's horrendous. Why? What? Wow. Okay. I still can't fathom it, but I copied it. So, at any rate, we have to be our own self-advocate to get that help. It's about, I know I'm going to mess up. On stage, Kevin knows this, on stage I have 3 rules. Don't trip, swear, or throw up. I'm going to mess up sometimes. I've never thrown up here. I've tripped. I try not to swear. Doing pretty good at it. But I know I'm going to mess up. That we try our best. That's all we can do, really. And then, guys, our support system, critical. I didn't have one most of my life. Now I do. I go out with some folks for coffee 3-4 days a week, and they'll text me, Kev, you coming down for coffee? I have this anxiety a lot of times I don't want to leave the house. They're counting on me. I got to go. But once I get out, I'm doing great. I'm fine. So it kind of pushes me. And we talk about, this isn't just a mental health thing talking with these folks. We talk about everything. It gets you out of the house. And I know they're there for me, and I can call them at any time. The other side of that is our professional care. Not just a psychiatrist or psychologist. When I divorced, for instance, my boys are half Japanese. I wanted them to retain that Japanese culture. So we did a keto. So that sensei, that instructor, a life coach, mentor, anything like that. But this has helped me tremendously. I needed something basic and relatively easy, something for me to follow. And this has helped me, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. And we get all this cortisol building up sitting. We got a lot of traffic out in California, a lot of traffic. And a lot of, well, don't you know who I am, and a lot of egos and things. But what do I do also for myself? And I've tried a lot. I have 2 Chihuahuas. I admit it, I've told you a lot about myself. I have 2 Chihuahuas, little bitty Chihuahuas. They're a lot of fun. I've done a lot of crying with them, just me and them, things. I spend a lot of time with these 2. They're a blast. They really are. Just by petting your dog or cat, if you like cats. I wouldn't touch this one. I think you'd come back with a nub, probably. But just by petting your animals, 10 minutes a day or so, can really help reduce the stress, reduce the cortisol. So these are some of the things that I do. And of course, I talk to them. They're my little kids, almost. I'll have a conversation with them. When they start talking back, it's one thing. But they're a lot of fun. Something else that I do believe in, and maybe a lot of you know this, is a crisis safety plan. Not only does it help folks, but I think that those who are helping others can get questions off of something like this. So it's for someone who may be at high risk for suicide, they fill this out when they're doing okay. And if there's an anniversary coming up or something that may be triggering, they can refer to this and it will help them. I'm a big believer in these types of documents. I really am.
Well, we have kind of walk you through our journey and how we met, how we came apart. From my heart, I always want to take the time and kind of speak to individuals now because that's just what I do, because my heart is always in for humanity and for people that are in these dark places that are in silence about it. So if you are somewhere, if you are in the room today and you're struggling, been struggling, please seek help. We love you and we need you. We see you every day. We understand how hard it is getting out of bed, getting through your day to day. Somebody needs to acknowledge your strength, and somebody needs to just say, we see you. We thank you for trying every day, even when you don't. And to those of us that are not struggling, who are trying to be there for somebody who is struggling, thank you for being there. Thank you for being understanding. Thank you for having the compassion enough to want to be there for somebody in a dark place, because we need you. But that self-care has to be important, and I'm glad he talked about it, because if Briggs wasn't in a good place when he met me, if his self-care wasn't at a good place, then he wouldn't have been able to help me like he did. And I think that we have to get better with identifying what's going on inside of us. We have to get better at figuring out who we are and what we need. My life didn't change until I accepted who I was. I went my whole life lying about who I was, and so help could have always been there for me. But until I accepted who I was, that's when I understood the help that I needed. A lot of times we shy away from the help. We shy away from the things that are going to help us the most because we haven't accepted who we are. Who you are doesn't define you. I've watched, humanity. We look at people who went through the most, accomplished so much, and we listen to their stories, and we not understanding that we all have our own personal stories. We can look at each other in the room. None of us look like what we've been through. You don't know what the person on your left or your right's been through. You don't know how they got out of bed last night or what they have to go through on their day to day. That's why it's always important for us to take the time to really just show compassion to one another. This world has gotten so far out of the hand, and we don't really, for us to get back, we just get the basic things. Looking at each other in the eye, making people feel like they're important. And it's not I always tell people, it's not mental health, suicide. This has nothing to do with race, religion, or anything. We're all in this together. It's the one thing that has touched every place on the face of this planet. It's the one thing that combines us. It's not AIDS. It's not racism. It's people feeling like they're alone. It's somebody somewhere. In the time we've been there, we lose what? One every 40 seconds. So imagine the time we've been here. Somebody somewhere in the world say, you know what? I'm not enough for this world. Even though everybody in this world is struggling with something, we all mask it differently. Somebody somewhere said, I'm not enough. We all have work to do, internally and externally, in order to get this world to where we need it to be. And I will go out on a limb here and say that I'm not working hard for change in this world that I probably will see. And I will say this always. The change I'm working for, I might not get to see. My kids will grow up in a world that would be better, but I might not see that change. So I need you to not be selfish enough to think that you might see the change. The work that we're doing is for the future. We all have a responsibility. Each and every one of us in this room has a responsibility because we all have a gift. We all have something to give to this world. And until you find you, that's when you find your purpose. And I promise you, the greatest gift that I can give people is the understanding that you got to accept you. Because when I found me, I found the world. Because I realized that I am the world. And I thank you for your time, and I thank you for listening. I'm going to give you time for Briggs.
No, you said it. What a way. We'd like to actually open it up. I can't even compete with that. I can't say anything.
Yeah, we want to ask questions. So,
are there any questions at all?
Anything, too. And I always say, don't feel like we've been doing this Q&A for about 10 years now, so I haven't had a question that I wouldn't answer or I couldn't answer. So if you need to know something, ask. If you want to pull us to the side, I'm here for the rest of the day. We're both here for the rest of the day. But don't leave here today without knowing, if you have a question or something you want to know, like I am pretty much, unfortunately but fortunately, I'm an expert in that dark place. So if you have a question, I'll be more than happy to answer it. Anybody?
Yes. We'll give you this mic. I'll give you this one.
Testing.
He answers most of the questions.
Thank you both for sharing your story and coming out here today. I actually have a kind of an unrelated question, but about the bridge. I was recently reading about the bridge rails. Our Suicide Prevention Coalition often showed Kevin Hines, the other Kevin Hines story, and so had a lot of discussion around that, and I had recently seen the article that the construction on the rails had stopped. Can you speak anything about what's going on with that?
Sure. That sounds louder. It is continuing. I crossed the bridge to come to the airport, and it is going on at night. It's supposed to be through the end of next year, I believe. So it's going to be on both sides, and when it first started coming out, I had the opportunity to meet with the architect, a gentleman named Donald McDonald. It took me a long time to get that one right. Donald McDonald. Brilliant man, but it's going to be about 20 feet down and about 20 feet out of marine mesh material on both sides of the bridge. And like I said, it is continually going up. It's a lot of work, and it's of course way overdue and extremely expensive. But when that does go up, I believe it's gonna pretty much stop the suicides from that bridge. There's going to be people who are going to test it, and maybe we'll get an influx before it is complete because it is kind of a magnet, unfortunately. I had two questions with regards to folks about this when they were talking about it. And I said, you know what? That's a lot of money, over $200 million. What could we do in the Bay Area with $200 million for suicide prevention besides the net on that bridge? But I say that having not lost a loved one off of that. So, and also, people have raised the question about the view. I had that question. But when a gentleman named Dave Hall, who I handled his daughter's case, and she leapt from the bridge, he came up to me and he said, Kevin, hang on to this. He said, you have a view and you have a life. And when he did that, I felt about that big, and he changed my mind like that. So it is going up. Hopefully when they take away a means, we talk about means reduction, that they won't go somewhere else. I know there's studies, there's a neat one out there that says when somebody has maybe thinking about suicide for some time, when they decide to do it, within 20 minutes, 48% will attempt. That's one of the studies that's out there. I've seen it a few times up on that bridge, those types of incidents. So I'm hoping, I would like to do the research in the Bay Area with the coroners, and hopefully it does get reduced a lot, and we can save some lives on that. So it is. That's my long way of answering. Yes, it is going up.
I was out in San Francisco shortly after they started building the rails. I'd never been there before, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But especially, I think, if you've never seen it, it doesn't, exactly, like a view versus a life isn't even a question. That's not even a calculation. But if you don't know the difference, it doesn't change the view. The view is everywhere, not just in that one little tiny spot. And I think it will. It'll make a difference for people on both sides of the rail.
It will. It's definitely a plus, absolutely 100%. I have been on parts and looking over, and it's there, and it's the same. It's fine. It's good. When somebody does get into that, they're going to have to get folks to come and pull this segment out and then replace it. So it's a good thing. It really is. It's just taken way too long to put this up there. Yes.
This is a serious question. It might not sound serious, but it's a serious question. You mentioned it was the listening and the humanity that helped keep you here in your interactions. Did the name help just a little bit?
I don't even, you know what?
It made me baby because
His name, and it made, I don't know, I was so out of it during that time, but I do remember him saying his spiel, but I don't know, maybe, I don't know. His voice was calming, so I mean, yeah, I could see it knowing I'm in that place. Hi, I'm Kevin. Like, I could see it now. I look back, like, yeah, probably.
it made it a lot easier for me to remember because you got so many things you're trying to think of. And Kev, oh, sweet, finally something. But yeah, and I just called him Kev, hey, brother, and building that rapport. And that's what this is about, building that rapport, getting that little bit of trust. So I'm a big believer in personalizing everything. And I know some folks don't like that. Maybe it's even out of policy for some folks. But with me, just Kevin. And that's how I worked it. Yes, ma'am.
Here, hold on.
Okay, sorry. My question is for Mr. Berthia. Your stories just together, you guys are phenomenal, and thank you for that. And I heard you several times mention belonging, and then I think about community and community connectedness. And I just wondered, in your own community, have you found strategies that help to build that?
It's different now. Then I lied about who I was. Now that I've accepted who I am, the number of people that have come to me thanking me, friends that just come to me, just the numbers of support of thank you. I thank you for being the one. Thank you for, and so it's just been a phenomenal ride. I mean, so the strategies is just being me. Like, continue every single day, no matter what, just be me. And if that means I'm gonna probably cry every day, I'm just gonna probably cry every day. That's just who I am. It's part of who I am. So, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. So my strategy is always to help people just be them. So, my thing is if I can continue to be me, it'll help other people just be them.
Thank you. And Mr. Briggs, is your cat a social media star? Because he should be. He's cute.
Is your cat a social media star?
No. You know what? I enjoy talking about. Yes, and I think that cat is. And it might be named Loki, if I'm getting it right. I don't have that cat. That scene was scary. I'd have nightmares. No. I'm a total dog person.
Hi. Can you guys speak to, I think it's important when we're talking about things like this, that so while 90% of those who've had a serious suicide attempt don't actually go on to die by suicide later in life, they die from all the other causes of death. People who especially really put it out there, but I've definitely worked with people who have gone through a suicidal crisis and have so much shame about reaching out for help when they've gone through the crisis and been well and seemingly life is great. And then they hit a really hard spot and they feel like they don't want to worry their family. There's so much shame about how am I back here knowing that I went from there to good and I'm back here. And then they feel really alone. So I'm wondering if you guys can speak to that a little bit for those who might be there.
I think that you got to understand something. Like we're trying to figure it out. Like, you got to give yourself a lot of grace. Like, I have messed up so much in my life. Like, I'm talking about a lot, but I have to understand that I messed it up because I wasn't in the mind frame to where I was making the right decisions. Because if my mind was right, because I'm making great decisions now, but I know I'm in a better place. So I think that we have to understand that you're gonna constantly go through these motions, and you gotta give yourself you gotta be okay. You gotta be okay with your emotions that you go through. You gotta be okay with your day to day. Is it gonna be a struggle some days? Absolutely. This last year is probably one of the hardest years of my life. Okay? I've had to pull from places that I didn't even know existed. So I know that you know, it gets real. But you're grounded in this, and you got everything that you need for this life. You have. It's inside of you. I guarantee you, because it's been inside of me. And I only speak from this because I know. I only speak from this because I have to have experience. I only speak from this because I've had to have this on a day-to-day basis where I have to get up and I have to remind myself, Kevin, you are great. And you're not defined by the things that you didn't do. You're not defined the fact that you're on your second divorce. You know, you're doing all these. I can name a million things of why I'm not great, but I can name a million things of why I am. So I think that happy balance and understanding that we're human. Like, if I would have known at what I know at 40, at 30, then I wouldn't have made those same. If I would have known at 30, at 20, like, we learn, and every single day you got to give yourself the grace and the understanding that you're learning, you're trying, and you're gonna make mistakes, and it's okay. But they don't define you. So I think that if we constantly live in that and understanding that we're doing things, I'm gonna do things, I'm not gonna do everything right. I try. Like, I try to keep my emotions in front of me. I try to do all these different things, but if I do fail, I gotta keep something in place for if something happens. Like, you know, I'm more understanding of where I'm at now because I know who I am. So it's like, okay, Kevin, if you do happen to go left, this is there. Love, I have put love in the places of my life that never were there. So that when I do go to that dark place, I can still feel love. I don't just feel pain. And that's the difference between a lot of us. We go to that dark place, there's no love there. Now I've purposely, and that self-love has to be that, self-love. Family cannot put love internally on the inside for you. So your loved ones, whether you lost them or they can't, you can't put love inside of a person. Like, that is a self-love thing. You have to put love there so that when you go inside your head, you know that there's love there. And I think that if we can get better at that, of loving ourselves, we haven't been taught. There's no books growing up that tell us, you know, treat ourselves good, you know, or it's always treat people well, treat other people, well, how do I treat myself? You know, treat other people like you want to be treated. What if I treat myself like crap? Right? Because we don't teach, there's none of training for us as a responsibility for us. And I think that until we get to that point, we'll start to see things change in this world. So that's my version of the answer, so I appreciate it.
Do you believe that your mental illness that you indicated is a chronic condition? In other words, you have good years, and you have years where you feel it's come back, and I'm going to deal with it because now I have the skills to deal with it. I hate to say this, that's a great question. It is, though. Yes, my mental illness diagnosis of the things I've been through, it does, and it affects me a lot. I do have good days and bad days, even though I do take medication. I do go through therapies. Some days, now I will tell you, I've never been suicidal. But I have days to where I am so angry at myself for not getting up. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I go to the gym? I'm failing. I got all these bills piling up. That's when I'm hoping one of these people that I go out with for coffee text me, hey, we're going for coffee, and they pull me out of it. And we don't have to discuss it, just getting out. You know, but yes, it does.
How
it
about
is
the
there.
other Kevin? Do you feel that your condition, your depression, your anxiety is a chronic condition that you're going to live with for the rest of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm going to be therapy the rest of my life. Okay. And that's why I'm going to be on medication the rest of my life. That's why I tell people, I will go to therapy every day. Like, you know, I'm going to be on medication every day because it's something mine's genetic. So this whole time that I thought that magically I was just going to run from it, it's not, it's in my blood, Kevin. Like, you're not going anywhere with this. So I had to accept it and understand that, no, it don't define. This doesn't, if I was defined by my wrongdoings, whoa. You know, and so I look at life now and it's like, okay, I'm defined by what on that level of it. And I'm defined by my great things that I'm doing. I'm defined by moments like this. I'm not defined by moments like the bridge. I'm defined by moments like this because people will remember me more by this than they will ever know by that. And so I think that understanding and that acceptance is everything. If you don't accept who you are today, you never will. And nobody around you, I'm telling you, you have to, everything today, look yourself in the mirror and say, flaws and all, I accept myself. just like that, and see if your life doesn't start to change. Because something's going to happen. You're going to see life differently.
So if I can, as a parent survivor, as a mother in this room, I think we all want to share as mothers how much love we have for the fact that you're here today and the gratitude that you're able to share this with us, because as mothers, we are so grateful that you made it through that day and had the opportunity to have this connection with this person who was there in the right moment. But that also brings to mind, as a mother, thinking about the fact that any one of us would have wanted to provide that opportunity to listen for our loved ones. And I wonder if you might be able to share how sometimes our love as parents and the love that you have for your parent, how sometimes maybe that might be a burden of creating those opportunities for you to be able to share all the hurt that you were carrying, so that we as parents might be able to see that we did everything that we could in that moment, but there was just something there that this stranger who the opportunity that you had with this individual you had never met before, how those beautiful things collided to create this opportunity for the two of you to be standing here this many years later, sharing your incredible story.
Absolutely. Let me Narvella Louise Donnell Berthia, my mom's full name, is single-handedly the greatest gift ever provided to me. Love just unconditionally I can't even describe the way this woman loves me. And it still wasn't enough. Why? Because internally, I had all these different things going on with me. And I think that as parents, even as I'm a parent, and I look at my son who struggles. My youngest is struggling. And I have to take the time to separate it and understand I'm a parent, I don't care if you're a clinician, I don't care if you know the book, that's still your child. And you're gonna always think and know that, okay, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. But it's a level of understanding that you have to have, even as a parent, and understanding that my child has his own battle. And that he's trying to transition and figure it out on his own. Because my mom loved me. I was loved. I was loved by my mom, I was loved by my dad, I was loved by the world, I was loved by people. So it wasn't the fact that I loved, I didn't love me. I didn't love me. So it didn't matter how much you love me. So moms, dads in this room, aunts, uncles, it doesn't matter how hard you love. Unfortunately, if I don't love me, then I can't feel it. Unfortunately, when I go to that dark place, that your love in the world, I've been to several funerals because of this. And I look at the family and I watch the family and how they mourn, and I just wish that person could feel, but they couldn't because of the place they were in. So we have to start this early in life. We have to stop being afraid of starting these conversations. We have to create a kindergarten program that allows kids to understand their emotions. The movie Inside Out should be mandatory for every human alive to have to watch it in order for you to function through life. You should have to watch Inside Out. If you haven't seen it, your responsibility is to go watch it tonight. Figure it out. Disney Plus, YouTube, because we don't know what we're up against. We don't know how important emotions are. We run around this whole lifetime and don't even understand that we're supposed to have these emotions. And if we will get better with our emotions, then we will not have mothers and fathers and loved ones that are losing and feel like they've lost the greatest thing that's ever happened to them. For you, I'm going to fight. And for every mother in here and every father and I have given my life to this. Like when I say I stay up tirelessly, I don't sleep some nights because I care that much. Okay? I understand that I'm a gift, that I'm not supposed to be here, that I speak up for so many people that I've lost. I know when people see me, they wonder why and how. I get up every day and I wonder how and why, just like you do. But I keep fighting, and I'm going to continue to fight, and I'm going to continue to give everything I can until one day we get to a point where we're not having this conversation. We hope you feel all of our love today. I do. I appreciate that. Sorry. I'm trying.
You went off on that one. So we lost our son 5 years ago, and I tell myself every day that, if somebody had, been there to somehow talk him down, so to speak, that he would have healed somehow. So I just don't know what that process would have been. I'm curious. In New York, you said something clicked.
Yeah.
And everything was different. But can you speak to, I'm sure it was more complicated than that. Can you speak to kind of how you healed from that very dark place since New York and up till
I've
now?
had to reprogram me. And it's a day-to-day process, man. It don't go away. I've had to reprogram. I've had to dig places, so it hasn't been easy. People see me on stage and they don't see the process.
I mean, did you have professional help?
I did. I've went to 4 different clinicians. I have a personal therapist who's a Christian therapist who we talk every week. I have about 4 different pastors that I talk to throughout the weeks. I have a ton of support. I didn't do this alone. I have a ton of support that I have to lean on and depend on, because I know that I'm one incident happening away from maybe being triggered the wrong way. So I have to be mindful of this. It's not going away. I'm gonna be adopted the rest of my life, and that's my biggest trigger. So I have to be mindful of these things. I have to be mindful of the things that I'm doing. But it is work, and it is a process, and it is a lot of different things you have to do. But it has to start with, it started with me accepting me and really allowing myself to allow the help to be there. And it's a lot, because we live in a world where you're not trained to accept you. You're trained to be everything that the world wants you to be. You're not trained to constantly just be you and stay in that mode of, I'm just going to be me no matter what. No, we constantly change and try to fit jobs and relationships. And we have to get better at just fitting me. And I had to be okay with me. Like, I'm an empathetic person. I can feel the man in Philippines that's laying on the ground right now, man. That's what I'm telling you. So I had to be okay with just being me. Like, I gotta be okay with Kevin, you're gonna cry for people and pray for people that probably people that forgot about. I get up in the morning and I pray for the rapists and the horrible people in this world that we forget about. Why? Because they still people. That's just me. And I gotta be me. So I think that part of my healing is just being me. Like, and being okay with just being in a world where people are different. Because I'm different than everybody else in the world. And I know that. I've been different my whole life. I don't see color, I don't see race, I just see people. And I love everybody. So it doesn't matter, it's just different for me. And I had to be okay with being different.
I have a question here.
So it's not actually a question, it's just a statement. I just wanted to applaud you two, because I think one of the most important things that's been happening, it's really been an overarching theme at this whole conference, is men talking about stifling their feelings and the effects that that's had. And I think that it's really so important and so brave of you both that you're being honest about that. I think other men need to hear that. And I think that, we've really failed our men in a lot of ways, because we've told them that being strong means you can't feel anything and you can't show any of these emotions. So men have just been stuffing this all down. I think it's really important that other men hear men talking about the path of opening up to your emotions and dealing with your emotions and healing and going to therapy. And I just think it's such an important part of what you're doing. And so I work in the prevention world, and I just wanted you both to know I work with parents, young parents, and a lot of what we're working on with young fathers is helping them to norm this, just be who you are, cry when you need to cry, let your sons see that, cuddle your sons when they're crying, talk about your emotions, talk about their emotions. And so I just wanted to applaud you both that was such a huge part of what you were talking about, and I think everybody needs to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you. And to go right along with that, last year we were both invited for the first time out of doing this for 10 years to quite a number of construction sites. And we have not done corporate construction sites, very, very, very little. They have a huge suicide rate. But it was so interesting to go to these sites and And some of them we went to, we had to dress like them. We could not go onto the site without the hard hat and the boots and everything. And going out there, and I'm thinking, oh boy, these are some tough folks. It's like talking to law enforcement. Boy, you better be on. But when I'm telling them my story, and Kev's telling his, they stop talking to one another, and they start looking at us. And generally, we're outside talking to these folks. But afterwards, they want to come up and talk. They are not given the chance to talk about themselves because it's such a hardcore industry. So things are changing little by little by little, but they are. I wish they would change faster, but yeah, it's really something to see people change, and all of a sudden they're all staring at you and they want to hear it, and then come up and talk to you about this. So, you know, I get to talk to a lot of you folks, and you teach me a lot. And then we talk and we learn more about each other and how can we talk to folks and be there for them.
I think that the definition strength, we have to just throw out the whole definition of strength. Because not talking about your problems and lying to the world doesn't make you strong. And that's what we're doing. We're lying about who we are as people because we don't want people who are struggling with their own individual issues to judge us. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, I won't make sense. And so my whole idea is now I'm talking to men and I'm like, no, like this is what strength is. Strength is being able to be vulnerable. Strength is being able to have a macho job like you've had and being able to say, no, I'm in a bad place. I'm dealing with things. I'm vulnerable. That's what strength is. And until men are able to deal with that, then we're going to always have a world where our numbers are way more astronomical than the women, because we got to get better with just talking about things, like to men, to each other. You know, we got to get better. And I say, if I got to be the face of a black man that's dealing with mental health, okay. If you got to be the face, of a white man that's older, that doesn't want, then okay. Then, older? I'm just saying. You said it. You always call yourself old.
I'm leaving.
Anyway, like he said, all I'm saying is, then that's what we have to do, right? Then we just got to start these conversations. But I think that's why I love our story. I mean, it's not only men talking. We break down, racism in America with this whole officer, African. I mean, we can go so many different levels to this. Humanity, compassion, understanding. That's why I love being a part of this.
Thank you so much. So much of what you have said has resonated with my experience as a clinician and working in suicide prevention. And I guess a couple of things, and you've addressed some of my questions already throughout the last few minutes, but I guess I just wanted to articulate a couple of things that really make sense to me. So first of all, I think it's sometimes a misperception that people who die by suicide or attempt suicide don't have people who care about them. And you nailed it a minute ago. Most people who die by suicide or attempt suicide have people who really love them. And what you said about not being able to feel it, not being able to experience the love, I think is so critical. And, I can reflect on patients that I've seen. The ones I've worried about the most were the ones who seem to have this incalcitrant, low self-esteem. And no matter what I would say, and I was very genuine, about all the things they had going for them and how impressed I was, and it just didn't seem to sink in. It was like, he doesn't believe me. He just doesn't believe it. So my question for you is going to be, and you've already partially addressed this, Kevin Berthia, is in looking back, so you were what age at the time of this? 22. And I know you said you had a history of attempts before then, but in addition to kindergarten curriculum, right? And we do think about these things in the prevention field, like the prosocial and emotion identification and development with young kids. Besides something like what you articulated, what are the things you feel like the highest priorities in suicide prevention? Like, what would have made a difference? How could someone, let's say you didn't have the kindergarten curriculum, who could have reached you, and what would they specifically have needed to do to get you to a point? Because he started to break through, right? Your New York experience started to break through. What, from your perspective, how could someone have cracked?
To be, what was difficult? To be 15 years old and seeing a man cry for the first time. Like, I needed to see that at 3 or 4. Like, it's so many different small things that could have happened and put in play. Just yeah, okay, throw out the curriculum in kindergarten. Okay, well, my community, somewhere in my community, we should have been talking about the effects of people that are not dealing with their emotions. Somewhere we should have been talking about, the stigma that surrounds the African-American community in the mental health. Like, somewhere it should have been something so I wouldn't feel so alone. Being adopted in the African-American community already made me feel alone. Because, in my community, somebody, aunt, uncle, somebody picks the kid up. Like, we have babies, somebody has babies, we don't just give kids up. I mean, that was my idea. Like, I didn't think I was a unicorn. So if somebody else would have stepped in during that age, growing up and, identify certain things and help me see certain things, I wouldn't have felt so alone. It was so easy for me to stay inside myself because I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything that looked like anything that remotely even looked like me. Anybody that was struggling, it looked like everybody had it together. My whole life, it wasn't until I was 19 years old till I found out that, okay, maybe the world is a little different. But by 19, you didn't already, put up all the stuff in your brain. It's hard to change who you are. So I think that just having that understanding early in life, just little things, having my parents be okay with talking about it. They weren't okay with talking about it because they didn't know. So I think that our parents, we have to be okay with talking to our kids. Talk to your kids. Don't just ask them how their day was. Ask them what made their day good, what didn't make it good, what would you have done to improve it, what would you do to make it work? Like, whatever it is, you got to get in dialogue with your kids. So you're talking to them and letting them know what's going on so they know they're comfortable talking about their emotions. So even that, because I never even talked to my parents. I never was comfortable talking about my parents. All that love I was given, they never created a safe place to talk about this.
That's really helpful. Thank you for sharing. And I also just want to reinforce what my colleague here at the table was also saying. I've been working in suicide prevention for 28 years now, and I can't tell you the number of times when the conversation has come up, how much could we reduce the suicide rate if we could get men to help seek, right? Like, how much would that alone make a difference?
We're the number.
And I also just want to say, and again, I applaud you both, because in my experience, particularly in underserved communities, in communities where discussing emotion is particularly not encouraged, in law enforcement, in the military, in professional athletes, right? I've seen the greatest impact when leaders or representatives from those communities, like law enforcement or the military, are willing to stand up and tell their story, because then it really makes it okay, right? It's one thing to sort of toe the line and say, it's okay to talk about mental health now, but to have someone actually willing, as a representative of that community, to talk about their own story is extremely powerful. So I want to thank you both for that. I also just want to mention one other thing, which is less sort of emotional, but something that I'm excited about. So I work for at SAMHSA, a federal agency, which I know is a trigger for some people, as we were talking about earlier. But one of the things I'm really excited about is we have our Garrett Lee Smith grant program, which has been focused on youth. And for many years, per statute, it's been ages 15 to 24. It just changed. We got it changed legislatively. So now the floor on that has dropped. So people who apply for and receive Garrett Lee Smith funding can work in suicide prevention at any age, which is consistent with some of the concerning trends we've seen, especially among young individuals in the African American community. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you.
We have another question right here.
Kevin, I really appreciate the fact. No, this Kevin, Kevin Bither. I'm sorry, you're getting all the questions. At any rate, I really appreciated the fact that you could tell us that I receive help from a Christian counselor as well. We lost our daughter a year and 2 months ago. She left a notebook with a diary of her day-by-day feelings. As you said, absolutely no self-esteem. But I think what's really helping me, not so much my husband, but what helped me is a spiritual counselor. I see someone else as well. I'm very fortunate to see two, at any rate. But there's something, and you addressed it because I wasn't sure I should even talk about this. But I thank you for mentioning it for some. It may be part of the healing is to realize that no matter what, you are beloved. And I believe it is because that's implanted by a God.
And
But anyway, thank you.
When I first came into the mental health field, I had a manager. We won't say her name. And a couple years, she told me what not to say. And now that I'm on my own, I'm alive because of God. Period. So if that offends somebody or makes it, that Kevin Berthia made it like I drove myself, and all this is grace. My life, everything that I get, these rooms that I get to get in, and all these fancy things I can do in airplanes, it's because it's grace, and he's allowing me. I'm living in my purpose, and I got into alignment. So yeah, I don't have a problem with. I'm gonna always say, yeah, I go to a Christian counselor. I went to several different counselors. None of them worked. I found a Christian counselor. Not only does he know the book that you know, he knows the book. So it works for me, and that may not work for everybody. It works for me. And so I always tell people, you have to find what works for you, because you are your only you. So find what works for you. And I'm living my dream. You know, I get the opportunity to do this and hang out with this guy and chill, and we get to do this. I mean, this is the greatest
The old
fulfillment.
guy, right?
I mean, I know he's not gonna let that go. We get to do this though, and it's just awesome though. It's awesome. Sorry.
There's a question on the other side of the room.
Oh, thank you to both of you for being here and for making the choice to end up in the same room with us today. I was wondering if you could speak to suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts within the criminal justice system, particularly with convicted felons. So they have a background, they have a past, that well-meaning therapist can say, the past is behind you. You're not that act, right? But after the third or fifth or sixth background check that doesn't get them a job, certainly doesn't feel like it's something that's in the past. And so I don't know if you have any shared experience or can shed some light on how to help that population.
I can talk about when I worked in corrections at Soledad and San Quentin, and then last year I was invited to go to it's called CMC, California Men's Colony, state prison in California down San Luis Obispo. And they have a group of inmates there that help elderly inmates. And I think we all need a reason and a purpose. And these inmates got up every day to help elderly inmates. They had a reason and a purpose. And I think if they're in the institution, they need to have something to do. And these folks did, and they were an absolute joy to talk with. It was my first time back in a prison since 1990, and I forgot how hard those doors slam and those gates go. Very, very scary place. But these gentlemen, yes, they messed up, and they're doing their time, but they had a reason and a purpose to get up. And I think when they get out, if they're given that opportunity, that's what we need to look at as a society. Yeah, I was in law enforcement most of my life. I have, and you pray for certain people. That guy that abused me, I don't pray for him. I will tell you straight out. I'll pray for another reason for him. But people deserve a chance, and there's a lot of rehabilitation going on. So if they get out, we as a society should give them a chance. I believe that personally. And I'm very much a conservative, so to speak. But they are coming back out. Don't leave them hanging, right? I just went to a women's shelter in Richmond, which connects to Oakland, very, very violent area, last week, and talked to folks. And they're getting grants, and these women are coming from all around the United States to go here and stay here and get the chance to get out of the drugs and alcohol, and then there was a lot of people who were prior inmates to go to these places. I think until we start funding this and allowing these things to happen, these folks, most of them want to do good. They want to get off the drugs and alcohol, but we got to give them a chance and get them into folks who know what they're doing to help them get out. So I'm a big believer in giving these folks a chance and allowing them to work. Most of them do want. They do want to do a good job. So there's a lot of them that can learn a trade of one sort or another in prison, and hopefully we can get something for them on the outside. I know that's not a great way to answer that, but I'm a believer in it. I've seen it, and even inside, they need a reason and a purpose to continue on.
We have a question here.
Hi, you both spoke so eloquently. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. I have a couple reactions. In one of my jobs, I worked in a crisis center, and we had a contract with the Detroit Police Department, and we would end up speaking with officers who had a tremendous difficulty sharing their feelings. And several of them would tell me, I can talk to you, but I can't go back and talk to anybody else in the department. And so I hope things will change. But I had another situation with one of my patients who was mentally ill, and I worked with him a long time, and he ended up being hospitalized. And when he was discharged, he still was not stable. And he told me he wanted to die and that he was going to purchase a gun. I was able to interact with his police department and prevent him from getting a permit. So what he then did was to go to the Ambassador Bridge, which is between Detroit and Windsor, and he jumped off. And his family asked to speak with me, and they were very concerned about me. I was so surprised and so touched by their thoughts of me and how I was doing, and that helped me in my own healing.
I just want to address this question to Kevin Berthia. My dad died by suicide. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. However, for many years, he would make a joke about, oh, I had a rough day. I'm just looking for the Ambassador Bridge. And I would say, well, Dad, why are you looking for the Ambassador Bridge? Oh, because I'm ready to jump. And we would laugh it off. We would laugh, and it was a joke, but I didn't realize at the time that there was an element of truth to that joke. So my question to you, Kevin, is why did you choose the Golden Gate Bridge? Like, why was that your chosen destination?
Good question. So when I got up that morning, I just needed a full food plan. And ironically, this is 2005. Google's not out yet. YouTube is not out yet. I had no information about the Golden Gate Bridge. Didn't even know it was iconic for suicide attempts. That morning, as I pumped my gas, I thought about driving to the Golden Gate Bridge. So for me, I have to say for me, it's a spiritual thing that drew me there. Because I didn't have an idea in my brain to say, I didn't talk to several people that have attempted or went out there. They've thought about it for months, or they Googled it. They did so many different things. I thought about it in the morning of on the fly. It wasn't that I thought about it for weeks or months or years. It was literally that morning, about 9 a.m. in the morning while I was pumping my gas. It said the Golden Gate Bridge, and I didn't even know how to get there. I had to ask for directions. It's not like I knew where it was at or anything. My first time being at the Golden Gate Bridge was that time that I tried to take my life. So for me and only me, and I'll speak for myself, it is something spiritually is drawn. I don't get it. I've done a lot of research. Why people come from way over the other side of the world, they pass, 15 bridges to get to one. I don't get it. So for me, I think it's something spiritually there, but that's just me and my own personal belief.
Thank you.
This question, I think, is more for Kevin Briggs, but you had mentioned about when you would go out on the bridge, you never really had any training. Do you find that, hopefully that has changed, and do you know, is it training that's working? Is it good training?
It's changed a little bit, yes. I wish it was more. Every single officer should have to go through some kind of negotiator training, not to be maybe a full-fledged negotiator, but at least know some active listening skills. Most of us, even in this room here, have not taken, I'm going to assume something, you know how that goes. an active listening skills class. Very, very important to do that. I think that's a good step. And then realizing that mental illness is real. I didn't realize, I shut down my own self. It was a weakness. So we're taught to go in and take charge. That's all there is to it. You go in and you handle a situation. I myself learned to step back and allow them to control some of it. But that took a lot. I had years of training, and in corrections, you don't back down. You will go down. You will go down. So it took a lot for me, but I see it with officers. Crisis intervention team training, CIT, is becoming more and more available to folks. I think it's a great start, but I think there should be more trainings, such as mental health first aid and assist and different things, to go in and talk to folks instead of rushing in and grabbing them and something like that. But I really do believe in it, and when we get the opportunity to do it, we will definitely go in and talk about. I have a whole gamut of things that we talk about when we're speaking with law enforcement that I have been taught, from the FBI and different negotiators, including psychiatrists and psychologists that go out with SWAT units and teams. So it is getting better, but we have a long way to go. I do. We do care. I think they need more tools.
We have a question here.
Thank you both so much for sharing. I'm a teacher at a high school in Detroit of all boys, and kind of piggybacking off of what they said about men's mental health. We have unfortunately had too many young men die by suicide in our school in the last few years. What is your advice on getting teenage boys to open up and talk?
Bring me in? No, I don't know.
We would. We definitely would.
Men are, they're trickier. They're a lot trickier because we haven't been taught how to deal with these emotions. We haven't been taught how to talk about our emotions. So I think that as long as we keep having these conversations, as long as they keep seeing men talk about it, that is going to be the key point. Like, these celebrities, everybody follows all these celebrities. As soon as they say something about mental health, the whole world listens. So if we can get these A-list celebrities, people that all these social media influencers, if we can start influencing some mental health, then I think that will help. I mean, I think that we just got to start the transition. We got to start just continue to talking. But yeah, I mean, this generation is a lot more tricky. Like, I wouldn't have been able to survive this generation because I was hidden. Like, everything is all so exposed, and cameras and everything is right in the front. So it's a lot more difficult for them. But we have to talk about this. We have to continue to create these safe places to talk about it. Have a small assembly, like, feelings matter. I don't know, like, whatever it takes, continue to pour into them that these emotions it's okay to talk about your feelings. Whatever we need to talk about, do it. I'm telling you, I'm not trying to plug myself, but I'm pretty good at this. I mean, as far as getting men to talk, I mean, it's something about me that I can kind of get in there and be like, okay, let's figure this out. But that's just what it is. I mean,
I'll email you to come.
I appreciate it.
I'm going to add on to that real quick. When I'm not traveling on Thursdays and Fridays, I work at my local schools, 2 high schools. There's 13 schools in all. So, and I did this for a reason, because kids scare the hell out of me. They really do. They're a very difficult crowd to talk to. But I would say, divide them. Divide and conquer, right? Get them into a smaller group and give them the resources. They're going to be laughing and stuff. But when I talk about this, I become very serious. And I give them the look like my cop look. And they start paying attention a little more. But to tell, shh, let the old guy talk. So I give them like the 741, because we know, like my boys who are 19 and 22, they're not going to call much, but they'll text. So give them that. And I tell them, I want you all to plug this into your phone, but only with the permission of your parents. Because, they may use it, or they may have a friend that can use that. And we talk a lot about resources available to them. But I like to get them in a smaller group, because when we're in a large group, they're going to talk a lot, and it's hard to keep their attention.
Yeah, you got to meet this generation where they're at. Like, make a TikTok video. I don't know. Like, find a way to meet where if this is where we're at, if their social media influence, like, we have to meet their generation exactly where they're at. We can't expect to go through something that happened 30 years ago, try to fix. Like, no, look, this is where you guys are at. You guys are, you like your phones and everything. So, create something that they text them every day. I don't know. Like, you guys want your phones every day, then we have to have your phone number, and then send out a text every morning and say, you're important. I don't know. Just, it's so many different things that we can do that we haven't thought. We have to start thinking outside the box.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's been phenomenal. So I lost my son Miles in 2017. He jumped from the bridge right near his elementary school and middle school that he grew up in, right? So constantly, I think, exposing himself to that plan. But at any rate, he was a very popular kid, so very similar to what I hear you saying, Kevin. And he, there was a lot with the social media, texting, way too much sharing of himself, different information, different things like that. And so the ability to come back from that, like that resilience, right? Like making those poor decisions and navigating that. So Kevin, I think you're really onto something, like having that dialogue, trying to teach that you're gonna make mistakes and that's okay, and how to rebound from that. So I just wanna say thank you, and I will be in touch as well with some things that we're doing in our community.
Well, thank you all very, very much. We were worried about this. I got to be very honest with you. We were worried about this one. But you've made us feel very welcome. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Testing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kevin and Kevin. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back for the Saving a Life Award. So enjoy.